Welcome to this special weekend edition of On the Pen. We got a special report coming to you today from our friend Lee Fits In over on TikTok and over on YouTube. Lee is an attorney out on the West Coast, and Lee is somebody who I have relied on a lot over the last couple of years as all these lawsuits have taken place, as anything that really takes place in the legal world. I have relied on Lee to help navigate that, and Lee is following a lot of this himself now. If you have been following the Mochi thread and what's been going on with Mochi and Aequita Pharmacy, Lee has taken a keen interest in this particular case because it happens to be in his own backyard. And this is a fascinating story here and some crazy information that Lee sent me a few days ago. Some other creators have made some content on this as well, but I wanted to get Lee's perspective in here, particularly because he's the source of this information. Now, I want to preface all of this by saying that this information here is all it all comes from a public records request that Lee made to the state of Washington Department of Health. He can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but essentially these are whistleblower allegations. So everything that we present here is going to be based upon allegations, not proven fact, but things that are worth discussing in this conversation and in the broader conversation about the safety of compound medication. So without further ado, I would like to welcome in our friend Lee Fits In. Lee, welcome back to OTP, buddy.
Hey, Dave, and all of Dave's people. Always good to be here, buddy.
Always good to see you.
Yeah, I guess I can't count now how many times I've hopped on here, but it's all legal. It's always the legal stuff because that's my wheelhouse. So it's fun. It's always fun.
Yeah. So did I set this up right? This was a public records request that you made way back in March, right?
Yeah, so it may feel like we're calling back a little bit of an old storyline, but actually this is just how long it took to get the public records. So when Mochi, their main provider, was shut down in March of 2025, I immediately made a public records request to the Department of Health because there was a letter that went out saying that Aequita has to stop making compounds. And Aequita, of course, and Mochi on their end will say, well, we voluntarily stopped, but they voluntarily stopped because they were going to be shut down. So I don't know how voluntary that is. Mm-hmm. But so anyway, nobody knew what exactly was behind all that. And of course, there's no transparency on Mochi's part. So we'll do the public records request, and they said it would take 6 months, which it did. And so I'm just starting to get the details of what was going on. Now, as Dave said, these are allegations from a whistleblower, and this is actually just one whistleblower complaint of what looks to be several potentially. But the investigative files and the facts that the Department of Health has dug up and what they looked into, that is still material I'm waiting on. So this is honestly just scratching the surface, as much as it sounds like there's some crazy stuff potentially going on, allegedly. There may be more. I don't know. So it's a story to keep an eye on for sure.
And if anyone's curious as to why I would cover this story, I don't want this to be perceived as dumping on anyone and their decisions about where they seek treatment or anything like that. Again, these are allegations. But, you know, for me particularly, I think about the fact that I have, you know, at the end of the day, in a given month, well over 1 million views on between our podcasts and posts. And so you can imagine the amount of times that people come to me and say, hey, what telehealth should I use? And I always say it matters more what compound pharmacies you use. And this story is a perfect representation of why, because there's such a wide spectrum of quality when it comes to specifically 503A pharmacies, in my opinion, which is why I partner with the companies that I do, because I vet that to the nth degree, right? Because safety is paramount. And over the course of the last couple of years, I've had many people come to me, whether you want to call them whistleblowers or just insiders who have information about one pharmacy or another, or even this story particularly, who have said things that we have not put out publicly because they are hearsay, right? So we want to be very careful about what we put out there. But this comes directly from a public records request from Lee. And so I want Lee to share in his own words sort of
Yeah.
what came back.
Yeah, and that's a good point in that this is a former employee allegedly. Now it's anonymous because they're whistleblowers, so they're promised anonymity. But the contents of the whistleblower complaint sound like they were indeed someone who used to work there. That rings true. They named names and gave dates and who they talked to and what happened, and then the pharmacy did, in fact, it was going to get shut down, and they did stop. And I don't believe they're currently compounding GLP-1s, but I don't know that for a fact as of today. But
Sure.
this threw a huge monkey wrench into Mochi. So the as Dave's got the document pulled up, this was
Yeah, you
one.
just tell me where to go when
Yeah,
we
go to
go
the
through here.
second page. This was one complaint, but then it referenced it. It's the this is the doc. This language here that you're showing is created and drafted by the Department of Health. This is not the whistleblower's writing. This is a summary of the allegations from the Department of Health, and it references at the bottom the fact that these allegations have already been investigated as part of other investigations, and then it lists there at the bottom, and then on the top of the next page, Dave, what looks to be maybe a dozen or so other complaints that are not this complaint. So those are things I'm still waiting for. So
Wow.
we have what is potentially the tip of the iceberg. Why it's important and why we're not just necessarily dumping all over Mochi is that, like Dave said, this is a story to watch as a warning for folks who are looking at getting into telehealth and knowing what could be going on at these pharmacies, because a lot of times you just sign up with the telehealth. Oh, I'm with Mochi. Oh, I'm with Amble or whoever. Well, no, that's your telehealth provider. Who you're injecting your body with is coming from a pharmacy
Right.
that you need to know, because this kind of stuff happens. Now, as of right now, it does not appear that Mochi is using Aequita. So that should be clear. We are not saying that this is happening now. This happened in 2024 and the beginning of 2025. That's where these allegations were happening. But it's something that everybody needs to know about, because if you're not careful, you may be getting meds from uh, a shady operation, I guess.
Mhm.
Might be the way to put it.
Well, yeah,
So,
and as we kind of get into these allegations, you'll see just what type. And I've reviewed this at a high level, and I've obviously watched your content. Sabina Hemi from over at GLP Winner made
yeah,
content about this too, and
absolutely.
based upon the allegations, I want to say that a lot of this stuff, not all of it, but a lot of this stuff are things that I have heard independently before this popped up in this information request, not necessarily of Equita, but other players in the industry. So again, I just want to
Yeah.
highlight, when you ask what telehealth company to use, as Lee said, the better question is, what pharmacies do the telehealth companies use, right?
Hmm.
Because the front end is very similar. The services may differ, but at the end of the day, the biggest burden that I feel as a the founder here at On the Pen and in our audience is making sure that we're connecting people that are doing their due diligence on the pharmacy end. And if true, these are some very stunning allegations.
Yeah. The allegation in this complaint is that, in fact, the family does essentially own Aquita or operate it.
And I
Uh,
want to say also that I believe
yeah.
that they have publicly denied that there's ownership there.
Yeah. Well, and here's what's funny. Okay. A little tidbit from the last hearing. So Mochi had a hearing in their lawsuit with Eli Lilly. And Sabina was there and sent me a picture of the docket on the wall of the courthouse, and it talked about who was there as a representative of the entities that had been sued by Eli Lilly, and the Mira's husband was listed as the representative for Aequita Pharmacy.
Okay.
So I found that pretty interesting. I got to dig that photo up. But so anyway, again, that's not legally binding, and they have said they don't own it. But the allegations here um, are that the pharmacist in charge, his name is Nathan Kinney, who's supposed to be in charge of the pharmacy operations, that the folks at Mochi, who are in the same parking lot, which again somewhat suggests these companies are probably pretty closely connected, um, that they would go in under his nose when he wasn't there. So they had keys, they had access codes, they had full access to that place, and seemed to be in control of hiring and firing the workers.
Mm.
So anyway, it certainly seems that if they don't own it, they have an immense amount of control, which is one thing I would say is when if you're trying to do your due diligence. I'm not saying that a telehealth can't ever be also the owner of the pharmacy where they send their patient prescriptions to, but that's to me a red flag. Doesn't mean it's a no-go zone, but if that's the operation where you're seeing an overlap of control or ownership with the telehealth and the pharmacy, you need to dig a little deeper, because that can lead to some conflicts of interest, some incentivizing of cutting corners, and it just makes it a little easier to do some things like we're seeing in these allegations.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the flip side of that argument is vertical integration is normal in just about any industry.
Yep,
But
exactly.
when you have a pharmacy and the potential, and I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but in a space that is growing very rapidly and expanding
Yes.
with I mean, I'll just say it. I mean, I'm seeing it all over the place, just like less than savory actors getting into this. There's a lot of opportunism here.
Yep.
You could
Yeah.
see where somebody starting a telehealth who's just jumping into the pharmacy game and willing to make money at all costs would
Yeah.
be a very unsafe and scary thing for patients. Again, I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm just saying it is happening elsewhere in the industry, and it's unnerving for me as an advocate for patients. So,
Yeah.
in consideration of your time, Lee, we should probably get into some of what's
Yes.
baked in
Sorry.
here. No,
I know. We
this
Dave
is a
and I could
fascinating
talk for hours
conversation.
about all kinds of things. Yeah. So the it comes out hot and heavy. Honestly, if you go to let's see if it's not that page, the next page. Yeah. So the complainant wrote an email. Apparently, in her first paragraph there, she said she was struggling to file the complaint online with the online portal. So she wrote this lengthy email. She or he, I don't actually know the gender. But right off the bat, the allegation is that the who was the head of pharmacy operations for Mochi, um, his name was Lindsay. I'm trying to remember his first name. It's right. I can't read the writing on there. It's too small. But he was the head of pharmacy operations for Mochi, not for the pharmacy, for Mochi. He's now been promoted to the head of business development for Mochi. And then Dr. Mira herself would bring non-employees of Aequita. So keep in mind, we have Mochi, a 4-minute walk away from Aequita Pharmacy. They are separate legal entities. Mochi people, Mr. Lindsay and Dr. Mira, would allegedly bring in non-employees of the pharmacy to work and operate inside the pharmacy without the pharmacist in charge being aware of it or in control of it. They would pick these workers up, and this is one of the crazier parts of the story, from the Home Depot or Lowe's parking lots. I would be shocked if they were people who they just decided, hey, we're hiring you and we're going to just happen to pick you up in a Lowe's parking lot. Probably suggests these are non-employees of the pharmacy, probably non-employees of uh, Mochi, but they needed workers to fill prescriptions. Now, they were not mixing or reconstituting the ingredients, the compounded actual material, according to the allegations, but they were helping to fill the orders. Because if you look at this parking lot, and I put a picture of it in my post, which is on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok. They would fill the orders and put them in the packaging internally, and then there would be a forklift, which I saw a forklift full of Mochi blue boxes the first time I went out there, and drive it over to Mochi's warehouse, and then Mochi would put things together. So they would get workers allegedly who could help them finish getting the prescription orders put together and then take them over to the warehouse. So these operations are interchanging. The allegation is that the workers would have access to patient information because essentially, they need to fill the right boxes with the right items, and they'd have patient names and potentially addresses. And so there was some serious concern about these non-employees working in the pharmacy. So the next what appears that this led to was a walkout of the pharmacy people. So this whistleblower describes the pharmacist in charge, Nate Kinney, as one of the good guys. Like that, this was kind of just happening with him not paying that close of attention. So I'm not sure how good that is, but he wasn't necessarily directing this kind of activity. But the people who work inside the pharmacy, the actual technicians and pharmacists and assistants, walked out. And when you don't have a pharmacist or pharmacy techs who are licensed to compound, you can't operate as a pharmacy, right? So there was a walkout because of the work conditions and maybe some of these allegations. And
Does it say when this was, just out of
the
curiosity?
summer of 2024.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a
So
little
I
over a
think
year
it's
ago.
actually the walkout is, I think on the next page, the top of the paragraph, there's a description of the walkout on that second full paragraph. You might be able to read it. That might give you the actual date. I want to say July. And so the allegation is that when the pharmacists and assistants and techs walked out, Mira and Mr. Lindsay and the chief of staff at the time for Mochi, again, Mochi separate from Aequita, brought non-employees of Aequita Pharmacy into the pharmacy to keep making and filling orders while the techs were out. Another pretty serious allegation. Now, here's what's interesting. These, again, are allegations. I'm not saying any of this is provable fact. This is just somebody's email from a
Whistleblower
whistleblower
allegation.
complaint. But in the letter from the state of Washington, which said you have to stop your operations, which they voluntarily said they did, the reasoning was uh, staffing issues and operating potentially with practices that were inconsistent with patient safety. So the basis for the closure appeared to align somewhat with these allegations, not necessarily the Home Depot workers, but that there may be non-approved, appropriate, licensed people operating the pharmacy. And that is consistent with what we're seeing here. So I don't have the dots connected because the investigative material hasn't been turned over yet. But some of these dots track, even though these are just allegations. So there's other stuff in there too. I don't know if anything else. I mean, obviously that's a big deal. I don't know what you thought when you first heard that they were picking up people in the parking lot.
I mean, I was just stunned by it. I don't know what else to say other than
What?
you got to be kidding me. But I can't say enough. Like these are just allegations. But
Yeah.
if this was happening anywhere,
Yes.
you can see kind of like how I set this up. Like my concern is bad actors getting into the space and willing to make money at all costs. And you think about like, again, I don't know the timeline on all this, but hypothetically, if this was happening around the time they were getting a lot of bad press, and the comment sections of YouTube videos and TikToks
Yeah,
were all
Reddit
like,
too.
"Where's my medicine? Where's my medicine? Where's my medicine?" The pressure on a business like this, if money trumps patient safety. You can see where people would go at desperate times to desperate measures, and that's, concerning if that's something that's happening, because obviously, you're not getting skilled pharmacy technicians
No.
typically from a Home Depot parking lot.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is like I know that it's the headline or eye-popping statement about the Home Depot and Lowe's parking lot. It doesn't matter. It does not actually matter where they got non-employees of the pharmacy. They could have picked them up from church.
Yeah,
They're not supposed to be there.
yeah.
They are not allowed to operate in
Yeah,
that.
well, especially, as you alluded to, a technician, or a pharmacist not being there, and people then being unsupervised to, um, ship and, ship compounded medication is.
And having access to patient information, which I
Mm,
would think that would cause a lot of people some concern, because there are
sure.
a huge amount of protocols in place at a pharmacy and at Mochi Health to keep that stuff private from any non-employee, especially.
Yeah.
So that's not good if that happened.
Which I
Uh,
think, yeah, I think was another allegation, wasn't it?
yeah.
That there were employee credentials being used that would have allowed access to public health or patient health information.
Yeah. So, and just in general, your telehealth, whatever telehealth you're with, the employees of that telehealth should not be in the pharmacy working. Uh,
Yeah. Right.
the that's a big. So this is what I would do. I mean, because getting back to your main point here, Dave, because again, these are just allegations. We don't know they're true, but if you have vertical integration, which in general can be a good thing, for a lot of reasons for a business, what you're going to need to be asking those questions is what are the firewalls in place between the business operations of the telehealth and the pharmacy,
Mhm.
because the more of an overlap, the more concern I would have. If that does that make
Sure.
sense, Dave?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you want those lines to be clearly distinguished. In other words, you want to you want to just always ensure that, even in practice and in optics, that a pharmacy is always acting within the best interest of the patients, and not a particular business that may have a financial interest. I'm curious, on a couple things here, because
Yeah,
I'm looking
fire
at the
away.
time here, and I want
No,
to
you're good.
respect that.
Yeah.
So when this case was marked for something called quick closure
Oh,
rather
yeah.
than like a full enforcement action, what does that mean? What is the
Yeah. So if you
relevance of
scroll
that?
back up to that top page,
Sure.
so it says quick closure or quick resolution, or again, I can't read the
Right
writing
there in the
from
middle of
on
the
my
page,
phone.
it says quick/early closure.
Yeah. So, and then when it references those other cases, I think if you go down to the third page, it says this case can be closed because we've already investigated these same allegations under one of the above cases. And so this particular case didn't need a full on investigation, which is why it's probably what I got first, is because all it really was a repeat. So the implication I get is that although this is from a unique complainant, whistleblower, other whistleblowers have previously come forward and said the same thing. So what it says to me is there may be multiple former employee whistleblowers whose complaints did trigger full investigations, which obviously led to what happened in March of 2025. So that's what I'm waiting to see, because if there's more, if there's even additional types of allegations, and then if we can see what the state of Washington actually investigated, I would hope there were interviews, photographs, videos, all the things that they went through to decide. Because I mean, a state agency doesn't just willy nilly go. You have to stop your pharmacy operation. That's going to be the product of a pretty thorough investigation that there was something amiss, right? At least that's my understanding. Is a state agency is not just going to go shut you down unless they've verified some of the complaints. And
Yeah,
there's
one of the things that I think is interesting, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I don't think that there was ever a recall initiated over any of the medicines from Equita Pharmacy. Are you aware of that?
yes, yeah, yeah. In fact, there's some videos from me in, I think it was August, so 2025.
Okay, so few months
Oh,
ago,
uh, oh,
2024 or
maybe
2025.
it was 2024. No, yeah, it couldn't have been 2025 because I don't remember doing covering. Yeah, I think maybe it was even before. Well, I will get the dates for you, but it wasn't that long ago. It was in line with the dates that we're seeing here. The Equita
There-
did have a recall.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it over compounded GLP-1s?
Yeah, it was a voluntary recall, and it was in the one state. It wasn't nationwide. It was like Massachusetts. They had to have been after. It had to have been over this last summer,
Yeah.
or spring, um, because it was Massachusetts for sure. And then a few other states, I believe, were demanding that they issue recall notices, but they didn't recall nationwide, which I found really weird. That, like, okay, the medicine that's going to Massachusetts is somehow fine, not good, but
Yeah.
the medicine going to Colorado is fine. But that, yes, so there were sporadic recalls,
Mm.
and so, but
And
now
what's your source for that?
there was letters that went out.
Oh,
There that we got copies of through Reddit users.
oh, okay.
Um,
So it's
but
Reddit information. Okay.
yeah, but I've seen the letters. Um, but so here's the key.
In fairness to Mochi,
I was just gonna say,
if it
yeah,
came from Reddit, it hasn't cut it in these cases that Lily's used that kind of stuff. But
uh,
it as an attorney, your best judgment is that they were authentic.
yeah. This is what I was gonna say. Is, first of all, they were voluntary recalls. Second of all, I have not heard or even seen allegations that anyone that they were tied to any actual patient harm.
Okay.
I believe that the recalls that I saw were because the pharmacy had got shut down, but not because there was any kind of actual complaints of injury or harm.
Okay.
And so it was more of a procedural recall because the pharmacy had closed and the state agencies that were involved said, well, that you need to recall those meds for those patients who had purchased them from you.
Mm.
So yes, it should be clear that the any recall that did happen, I'm not aware of any of it having to do with actual injuries or harm to
And
anyone.
if people want to explore that further, you said you have
Absolutely.
content up on your own
Yeah,
internet channels about that.
I have videos up, at least on TikTok. But
Okay.
I'll go back through. Yeah, but that's a good question. I didn't prepare for that question, so I
Yeah.
apologize. I don't have that right off the top.
All good. I was just thinking about it in terms of all of
Yeah.
this. Uh, again, these being all allegations against Mochi from a
Yes. Well,
whistleblower. It's like what it seems to me if this stuff were true, it would seem to me that the state would sort of want to issue a recall on the medicine because allegedly you didn't have pharmaceutical oversight or pharmacist oversight on some of
yeah.
these things. And
Yeah. Yep. That's why I'm very curious to get the material of the investigative material and see what's going on. But here's one thing that I can tell you that isn't whistleblowers, me. Um, when this was happening in March of 2025, I called the state Department of Health and I said, are the medications being shipped out right now from Aequita safe to use? And they had a prepared statement that said that we cannot confirm that the medications are or are not safe. They would not say that they were
well,
safe or not safe,
and that
which
could,
I
I
found
mean,
interesting.
obviously you're an attorney, so you get sort of where that's coming from. But if the FDA doesn't make a statement about that towards any compounds at all, let alone what's going on here or allegedly going on here. it stands to reason that that would be their answer about any compounded medication anywhere for anybody who really looked into it. Because typically they're going to punt to like FDA, probably regulation, I would think, on that. And if there is none and the FDA doesn't vouch for the safety and efficacy of compounds, why would the Department of Health? Make sense?
Yeah, but yeah, and the FDA is so shorthanded. I don't think enforcement action on small pharmacies is, unless people start dying, it's just not going to be on the radar for them to
Yeah.
do. I think.
Well, I mean, this is a 503A pharmacy, so it would have been overseen by the state pharmacy board,
Yeah, well, that's true. That's
which
true.
probably would punt to the FDA on their general thoughts and statements towards compounds, but not super important to the context of this conversation. But I did want to bring this story. I mean,
Yeah, I have. I think I've got. Well, I don't see. I don't think I can close my screen and pull up because I think I do have. I'll send you the link, Dave, on the recall. I think I have it recently pulled up because somebody mentioned it in my comment section.
yeah. So what I'll do is I'll drop that in the description of the YouTube video.
I'll send you.
And so people can go see that if they'd like. Again, want to couch this all as allegations. The reason and the spirit with which I bring Lee's reporting here is, again, to just flag, this the allegations that are mentioned here are not super far fetched when you consider, when I consider, I guess, in the position that I'm in, knowing people in the industry, talking to people in the industry, and having sort of my finger on the pulse of where the industry is going. It's going to
Absolutely.
be more and more important for people to do their homework on these pharmacies, because at the end of the day, there are people who are opportunistic jumping into this space. And there's a lot of venture capital money jumping into this space, and it's not a knock against VC money, but some of those are more ethical than others. And when it comes to making money, it's just kind of, to some people out there, it's money at all costs, right? And
Yeah.
patient safety be damned. And certainly if these allegations were to be true of any compound pharmacy,
Right.
this is terrifying for patients.
Yeah.
And so it's just so important that you do your homework. It's something that I consider, as number one when I choose, who I work with. And
Yeah.
so it should be number one for patients as well. Where is your compounded medication coming from? Is the source trustworthy? All of those things are important. And this is an important conversation to be having, to, I just think, highlight the importance of people being aware that it matters where your medications are coming from.
Yeah, that's very well said, Dave. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you, Lee, so much for being here. I always appreciate my ability to chat with you about this stuff and your wealth of knowledge on this stuff. Thanks for giving us some time. Where can people follow you, Lee?
Yep, I'm Lee Fits In, which is a long story I can tell you later, where I got that name, but I'm on. That's my handle. That's everywhere.
Excellent.
I'm not really on Facebook that much, but Instagram, YouTube,
Lawyer guy.
lawyer guy. Exactly.
That's
So,
awesome. Well, thanks again, Lee. It's good to see you as always,
you
buddy.
too, Dave. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.
All right, take care.